What's up, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more punk rock, and we're back with some more Propagandhi. I did want to react to a song on every one of their albums, and that includes their sort of unreleased album slash like compilation album, basically an album that they put out with a bunch of unreleased material and stuff that had appeared on compilations and so on, with the very amusing and sort of self-aware name where quantity is job number one. This is the front cover, as you can see here. This is the actual disc. This, which I don't know if that's Chris, but you know, shout out to someone wearing a Speedo like that on a beach. Very ridiculous. But it says, warning, this CD contains old and out of print, hard to find, unreleased, live, demo, and otherwise painful and embarrassing crap, not new crap. Proceed with caution. I believe this came out on their G7 Welcoming Committee Records label, their own label, independent punk rock label. Is this 1998? Yeah, I think this is 1998 on, like I said, G7 Welcoming Committee. Look up what the G7 is and, you know, why they might want to welcome them in a very, you know, maybe scare-quoted phrase. Nevertheless, we're going to listen to a tune on this called OKA Everywhere, or OKA Everywhere. It's a part of Quebec. I know a little bit about this song just based on my, you know, in my graduate degree for my master's, I wrote about the Muskogee peoples in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, but basically I focused on indigenous American history, in particular in what we now call the American Southeast, although at the time, at least among like Europeans in that area, it was called the Southwest. Nevertheless, because when you get into studying indigenous American history, you don't just study like, you know, one group in one place and one time. You do, you know, you have to take classes about different places and so on, and you do try to tailor your research to things that you're studying, even if, you know, it's parallel or it's not directly connected. So my understanding is that there was a particular group, community, tribal group of Mohawks who were living in this area of Quebec, and their ancestors go back there at least to, I think, the 17th century, if not earlier. They got into a land dispute with the Canadian government because I guess the Canadian government had thrown their support behind this like resort project, and I guess they wanted to enlarge the golf course and add like an additional 9 holes, but that would require taking land that was technically supposed to be Mohawk land, and it ultimately led to a standoff, if you will, and a sort of violent dispute which lasted, I don't know, something like 2-3 months, something like that. I believe a couple people were killed. But, you know, it was another example as late as the, you know, late 20th century, and, you know, with the Canadian government perhaps having a better reputation than, say, the United States, although I was going to say a better reputation in terms of their history with indigenous peoples, but that's a joke, right? Like, in the last couple of years, we found out that at some of these, like, you know, Christian schools where natives, First Nation people were sent, there's like mass graves of like hundreds of people that were buried like on the grounds of these like assimilation schools and so on. So I don't know, perhaps the, you know, Canadian government's history of, you know, accommodating and negotiating with indigenous peoples is just as bad, if, you know, maybe not worse in some cases. It's hard to imagine that it's worse than the American government. I mean, honestly, if you study Native American history in conjunction with the U.S. federal government, as I have, and in particular, just go look at the history of the Muskogees or the Creek peoples as it relates to the American government. Nevertheless, the point is, I believe this is a song about that struggle, that resistance to just being, you know, told, hey, you just got to get out of the way again and give us more land again, just like your ancestors did, because you know what, we need a golf course, we need an extra 9 holes so that, you know, people can come from other parts of Canada to pay money to play golf here on, you know, your ancestral lands and so on. So I believe this song is making reference to that crisis, and there's a line at the end which, I don't know if Chris wrote this, but he's the one who sings it, but it's something like, I maintain that the best thing I've ever said, if a Kevin Costner cavalry is a means to their end. Kevin Costner cavalry, if you don't know, the movie Dances with Wolves. It was a very popular movie. In some respects, it's entertaining and compelling entertainment, but it does, I don't know, it casts sort of this, you know, white Union soldier as sort of this, not messianic figure, but like this, you know, transformative figure who, you know, ultimately starts resisting the encroachment of the army that he was formerly a part of, and he's trying to help the indigenous peoples, Lakota Sioux, in that film. Understand that changes are coming that they're not going to be able to resist, and they may have to leave their land and so on. But it's, in a way, I think it's been seen by some as like apologia, in the sense that it's like, well, not everyone in the government was just pushing these people out of the way, and maybe we can recognize the humanity of these peoples that for generations, whether it was historians or films or whatever, that basically you Native Americans, you're just background, you're just the supporting cast of this story, you're not like really a part of what should happen here or so on. And so, like I said, I do think this song is sort of describing what happened and lamenting that, look, if the best we can get from the cultural and political authorities is a movie where this white character comes across, oh well, he felt bad about what was happening, and he tried to help them, and it like, if that's their like concession to concerns about tribal sovereignty and indigenous rights and so on, well then why don't we just give up, because the struggle's clearly dead. So I really do like the last line, or the last stanza of this song. In any case, this is G7 Welcoming Committee number 7. The record, or CD in this case, was made in Canada. This is Propagandhi, OKA everywhere, or OKA everywhere, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but here we go.
The best thing I saw on TV was that SQ come catching a woman with his teeth. Got so bad I'm Canadian, and her husband was a fucking stuck pig.
It has a more like jam session in a studio sound rather than like a fully mastered, like proper album, fair to say. Although I don't mind that, I like a gritty sort of sound. A raw, like punk sound, but it just sounds different from either How to Clean Everything or Less Talk, More Rock. And I assume that's a reference to like like the schools that, like the cultural, like assimilation schools, I'm not sure. I like the sound right there. Reflective. The best thing I think I ever said. Why don't we pretend approval is upon what they depend? Yeah, love it. Again, it maybe has a song that, like, it wasn't given the full, like, mastering treatment and so on, because it doesn't sound quite as, like, rich and powerful as the stuff on How to Clean Everything or Less Talk, More Rock. But again, the fact that it was on, like, this sort of unreleased material album, I think may help explain that. But I really do like it. I like the lyrics, even though, again, the historical episode, I'm only sort of, on the edges of. I just remember reading a little bit back when it was happening, and I was like, a teenager in the 90s. I think it was like 1990, so I think I probably didn't read about it till a couple years later. And indeed, I think I was reading about it a couple years later in light of the, like, Quebec referendum, when, they were maybe gonna, try to vote for independence from Canada. And I remember reading about, like, well, the province itself has a spotty history in terms of acknowledging sovereignty and so on. So I think I read about it in that context. But it's not something that I have studied in detail. So do let me know if you have more insightful comments on this. I know a couple of people who watch some of the videos, including the punk rock videos, are from Canada, so maybe you'll have something to say about this. Shout out to Ryan. Really appreciate you watching the videos and commenting. But yeah, like I said, I do enjoy the song a lot. I enjoy a lot of the songs on this album, even if they do have a bit of a raw sound. Raw. There's a remix or another version of Hallie Does Hebron, but it's like Hallie, what is it called? Or no, that's right. The original is like Hallie Selassie Up Your Ass, and this one is called Hallie Does Hebron, which, we'll get into the geopolitical discussion of that later. But like I said, there's a different version of And We Thought Nation States Were a Bad Idea, sort of, to my mind, the marquee track of their second album, Less Talk More Rock. So there's a couple like alternative versions of songs that exist on their proper releases, but most of this stuff is like unreleased songs that don't appear anywhere else. So it is a cool album to own. Not my favorite Propagandhi album, fair to say, but I don't think they ever intended it to be. It was just like, hey, we have other stuff if you were curious to hear it. Some of the later stuff are live shows, and one of my favorite moments I do have to mention, there's a part where they're talking a lot between the songs. It's like one song and then they talk for 5, 7, 8 minutes, like whatever. And at one point you can hear someone in the background just literally shout, "Play some fucking songs!" And I don't know if it's Chris or maybe I think it's Chris. So someone's like, "Hey, we're just carrying on in the tradition," or no, it can't be Chris, because I think Chris is the one who retorts, but someone says, "Well, hey, we're just carrying on in the Propagandhi tradition of being poorly unorganized." And I think it's Chris is like, "Poorly unorganized? Isn't that a double negative?" And I just, as an editor, I want to give him props for that, because it is, right? Like, you can be unorganized, or you can be poorly organized. But if you're poorly unorganized, then you in fact, by default, would seem to be organized. So yeah, that moment always made me laugh. Not only for someone who like came to see Propagandhi, eventually just getting irritated that they're like dicking around between songs, like, "Play some fucking songs!" And I love their reply to that. "Hey man, we're just carrying on in the tradition of being poorly unorganized." And then another member of the band is like, "Hey, wait, let's talk some more and waste some more time while we parse out the logic or the semantics of what you just said." But yeah, like I said, I'm a fan of the album, even if it is sort of like a, unusual sort of, cobbled together album. There's other good tunes like Leg Hold Trap. I'm a big fan of that one. Utter Crap Song is actually like a really good song. Yeah, so there's some other good ones on here. So we'll come back for this, but I think, have I reacted to every album? I don't think I've done one from Victory Lap. But I think I've reacted to a song on every other one of their albums. Although I say that, maybe not Less Talk More Rock. Or no, I did State Lottery. Although, I don't know if that one's up on this channel. It was up on my old channel. We'll have to see. I may come back and redo that one, because when I reacted to State Lottery, I was sort of like took the lyrics in a different direction that I now understand that they were originally intended to be suggesting. So I may redo that one. But bottom line, I want to eventually have at least a few reactions for every one of their albums, so I did want to hit this one. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you like the album. Let me know if there's another song you'd like to hear, whether it's on this or a different one. Shout out to the Propagandhi fans out there. As I've always mentioned, or as I've mentioned a number of times, they will always be one of my favorite bands, if not the favorite, just because they introduced me to a world that in many ways led me to other places like acid techno and so on. Again, I don't know if I'd become an acid techno fan if I wasn't a punk rock fan first. So yeah, shout out to Propagandhi, because they were sort of the beginning of everything for me. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Have a good night. I'll see you next time. Peace.